Where were you on November 16, 2005? Ask any Australian football fan that question and they'll be able to give you a detailed rundown of their every move.
From what I remember, I was on a football pitch. What a night it was. What an experience for Australian football. 6 of us flew to Sydney. I remember we had lunch at a nice restaurant, got to the ground nice and early, picked our spot, had a few beers.
I flew to Sydney for the game. I had to go. We were going to qualify.
I was in probably row Z.
Me, well, after skipping school, I stood here for hours on end, holding these very signs. So many cars beeped their horns, the police turned up.
I remember just watching the whole game with my old man. My mum kicked us out of the living room. There was no way she was watching football.
But nothing was going to faze me or any other Australian football fan, because after more than 3 decades, Australia were finally going to qualify for the World Cup and truly experience what the beautiful game can do.
No matter what sport you followed, I'm pretty sure people watched that game.
One of those days, one of those nights that will live in the memory forever.
Watching that match was just unbearable.
It was just down to Johnny really to do what he does.
We were all in the huddle, it was like silence.
I don't think I was even watching, to be honest.
You could arguably say the future of football in Australia hinged upon it.
4-2. He wins it for us. John. Here's Aloisi for a place in the World Cup.
If you think about it, Australia should have always been a footballing nation. A country built on migrant communities who love the game. We excelled at every sport we ever turned our hand to.
We have had this extraordinary rate of success in a whole range of sports, whether it's at the Olympic Games, cricket and rugby, incredible success, tennis as well.
Yet despite all the success in these sports, football down under was a laughingstock.
Football has a tradition here of being picked on. It's a form of bullying in a way.
There was instances where Australian rules football supporters would spread glass on soccer fields to sabotage the pitch.
Our game here in Australia was not as easily accessible as AFL was or rugby league was.
Certainly in terms of the media, it didn't exist, or it barely existed.
The game was basically treated as not even a third-tier sport. Well, it's the game that the migrants play. We just put a little story at the end or a little paragraph in the paper.
You'd never see football on the news or advertisements at all. It's all rugby, cricket.
We grew up knowing that our game, and we truly believed our game was the best in the world because it was throughout the rest of the world. Yeah. And why couldn't it be here in Australia?
It's never really captured the imagination of, I think, the Australian mainstream.
It wasn't too long ago that Socceroos could hardly get a half-full stadium.
Tim Cahill could have walked down the high street in Sydney and not been recognised. That's how bad it was.
But this wasn't just another story of football failing to make its mark on a non-footballing nation. The manner in which the Socceroos continued to struggle was at times unbelievable. So much so that Fox Sports pundit Adam Peacock has written a book on it. Adam, how crazy does this story get?
Yeah, pretty crazy. The Socceroos, over 32 years, found new ways to stuff things up.
7 failed qualifications in a row.
Yep. 77 was like, oh yeah, we'll just continue on, we'll qualify again. Didn't happen. 81, they brought in a German coach, he didn't work. 85 was tough because we played Scotland. And the Socceroos played pretty well that night, but got a 0-0, wasn't enough, we're out again.
89, it was to Israel?
Yes, we fell at the first stage. Really bad result in New Zealand. New Zealand. Come back, have to get a win against Israel. It doesn't go our way.
It was one heartbreak after another.
1993, a little bloke called Maradona was our opponent, so that wasn't easy. They were just that little bit better. They won the game and got through. We thought, this is never going to happen. This is just simply never going to happen.
I started following the Socceroos the moment we failed to qualify in Melbourne in 97.
1997.
That's a swear word, Iran, in Australian football.
I refused to watch any video from the game. It was too traumatic.
We were destroying Iran. We were 2-0 up. The radio commentator said, pack your bags, we're going to France.
And when we were 2-0 up, I was still on the bench thinking that we're going to go to the World Cup.
I had already booked games in France.
But it just all went wrong in 5 minutes.
Some guy runs on and for his 5 minutes of fame.
A guy by the name of Peter Hoare, who's known as a serial pest, he decided to run onto the pitch and pull the net down. Delay, 10 minutes, momentum.
You just got that sense that it just didn't quite feel right.
All of a sudden, Iran scored 2 goals, and before we knew it, we were out.
It was actually the first time I've ever seen my dad cry.
You couldn't quite comprehend what had happened and how it had happened.
You just feel for them, not just the boys, they are representative of so many people who make this game their life. It's just, I can't say anything, mate.
Well, the Socceroos knew the road to the World Cup would be long and hard. They found out today just how long and hard it could be.
In 2001, we had Uruguay. 4 million people, but 4 million football nuts. They got off the planes, they are met firstly by customs who say, I need to check all your boots. No real reason, just to tick them off.
And then they had to endure an extremely hostile welcome. Players were jostled.
There was loads of people just channeling the bus, swearing at us, spitting at us.
Who got spat on?
I did. I copped one, I think, on my arm.
I ended up playing with Uruguayans after, and they said, they pay people to come to the airport to abuse us a little bit. That's just, making sure that we know that we're in their country and they're going to make it hard for us. In that game there, we let the fans get to us a little bit.
3-0, that was the end of it. 60,000 people at the Centenario going absolutely berserk.
The one thing I'll never forget is Tony Vidmar in tears after the game.
That image of him bawling his eyes out, every Australian fan felt the same.
Believe it or not, many attribute the Socceroos' run of bad luck to a bizarre little incident that happened in Mozambique during a qualification match in 1969.
There was a curse put on the Socceroos team because they failed to pay a spiritual witch doctor, and so there was bad luck for us for the next however many 30 years or so.
That curse was supposedly the theory behind why they kept failing in these, 4 yearly attempts to get to the World Cup.
But believe it or not, football in this country faced far more sinister obstacles than witchcraft and curses, as mainstream Australia continued to hold a toxic mentality towards anyone who loved the game.
There was a fair old dollop of racism in this country when it comes to football, when in fact, of course, as we know, football's been played in Australia since the 1880s. But because the migrants essentially formed the National Soccer League, the perception of mainstream Australia became that this was a game that somehow didn't belong to Australia. It was a foreign game. It was Sheila's Wogs and Poofters.
Ironically, that term was made famous by a white Anglo-Saxon Australian from the Aussie suburbs of South Sydney. His name was Johnny Warren, and he was a hero of mine and anyone who fought for the game.
Sheila's is Australian slang for women, Wogs is for European migrants, and Poofters, well, I think we all know that.
It resonated hugely with football fans in Australia.
Johnny Warren is basically the closest thing to a saint Australian football has.
The start of his adult life was falling in love with the game and the world that underpinned the game, and the majority of his adult life thereafter was trying to bash the door down in Australia.
Johnny Warren had the vision for the game bigger than anyone dared to dream of. He understood its interconnectedness with the wider world.
Johnny Warren captures what we're all about.
Why's that?
The dream.
I remember Les Murray on SBS saying Johnny Warren's passed away, and I felt like I'd lost my dad, felt like I'd lost a grandfather, felt like he was part of the family for football fans.
I told you so, they're the famous words associated to Johnny Warren, as in, I told you so, look at football, look at what it can be.
The I told you so message was Johnny's great, unshakable belief that soccer would eventually be, I suppose, the #1 or most popular game in Australia.
In 2005 came around and Australia had another World Cup qualification playoff, and again it was against Uruguay. But this time the stakes were even higher. After decades of failed attempts at creating a popular national league, the Hyundai A-League was formed with proper backing and organisation. All it needed was genuine public interest.
The government, with the help of the local Olympic Committee, got hold of a gentleman called Frank Lowy. They came in and basically turned the sport on its head. The A-League comes in, there were no ethnic ties to any of the clubs. They brought in advertising gurus, identified the fact that you need one team in each city.
What people forget is that the new league desperately needed the Socceroos to give them a turbo boost by qualifying for the World Cup as well.
I remember reading the newspaper at the time and the headline said soccer's last roll of the dice, and it really felt that way because you just knew, you could just feel that football in Australia couldn't deal on the domestic front and international front with another failed World Cup qualification. John Safran, a famous comedian in Australia, was taking no chances, returning to Mozambique to lift the curse on behalf of the Socceroos. You really think he helped?
Yeah, definitely. There was a TV show about it, Reverse the Curse.
Somebody had to go take that voodoo hex off.
So that's what he did. He went around the world trying to find, the antidote to this curse that had been placed on the Socceroos.
Well, I've said, I love the Socceroos, but I'm not sure if I'd go to Mozambique and have chicken blood poured on me.
Although we lost 1-0, we had that confidence and that self-belief that we'd be able to overturn that result when we came back here to Sydney.
We just thought it was our time, and every player just believed that this was the time that we're going to go to the World Cup.
There was all kinds of stories going on about we got the charter flight back from Uruguay. The Uruguayans had to get the commercial flight, so they were back in 67B licking their kneecaps in economy and things like that. So there was this edge. There's this amazing edge to the game, like only great football matches, great football occasions can really bring.
What I remember mostly was just there was a lot of nervous tension.
Sydney that day was a special place to be.
The whole lead up to the game, we had 80,000 people singing for the hour beforehand. It was quite incredible.
The Uruguayans, they wanted to make it tough for us, and I heard a bit of ruckus behind me.
Richard Morales, the big Uruguayan striker, decided to go up to Tony Popovic and just start a fight basically. Stood on his foot and kicked his calf.
In the tunnel?
Yeah.
That's news to me.
No, it kicked off.
Before it even, I mean, how many incidents?
I know, that's why I wrote a book on it. There's so many. I think their rationale was, let's pick the biggest, baddest looking guy. If we can get on top of him, we can get on top of anyone here. So they went and picked him, and Popper stood up for himself. And then it finishes, and then they start walking out. And they're like the school kids who have got away with the fight on the backtrack.
I remember early on them having the upper hand, so we were a bit under the pump.
Eventually our boys sort of rode out the storm. We started getting on top, and then Chul came on after half an hour.
Popovic elbowed, bang, in the head, Recoba. Red card, every day of the week. For some unknown reason, the Spanish referee goes yellow.
And Goose didn't want to risk going down to 10 men, so Goose decided to put Harry Kuehl on.
Kuehl came on, the game changed.
He nearly had an air swing, but it was the most delicious miss-hit in the history of Australian football because waiting right there in the box, Mark Bresciano.
And I saw Bresh start to swing at the ball. I'm going, you beauty. The place just went off. It was unbelievable.
I still don't know how he just didn't want to run somewhere. How can you just stand up and do...
Craig Foster had pretty much gone, or midway through the second half. He was actually physically applauding every good pass that the Australians made, and I was having to grab his hands to keep him quiet. He was essentially a fan in the commentary box.
It was fantastic, but there was still, as we found out, a fair bit of drama to come, 90 minutes and then penalties.
I turned around to my brother that night and I said, we've got Schwarzer in goals. These are some of the best players we've ever seen in this country. And he goes, yeah, we're going to win.
It was basically down to who was going to, hold their nerve from 11 metres.
Here we go. It's Harry Kuehl against Fabian Carini.
Harry said, I want to take the first one. I want to get us off to a good start.
First penalty, Australia.
And Schwarzer, amazing save.
Saved by Schwarzer!
What sticks in my mind is just his big palm. It's just this one big palm coming across, and he just gets up, gives it the big come on. From there, it was just like, we have to win it.
The Duke's up, the V-Bomber's up. Here we go. He scores this, then if they miss the next one, we're through.
Viduka. Oh, he's put it wide.
He must have taken the worst penalty of his life.
Your heart just sinks.
Salajeta steps up, and Schwarzer comes up with one of the best saves you're ever likely to see.
Oh, great save again!
And that then gives John Aloisi the chance to step up and be the man.
What were you feeling when he lined it up?
Oh, shitting myself.
I'm thinking, please God.
I don't think I was even watching, to be honest.
It was just down to Johnny really to do what he does.
But the beauty of it was, John Aloisi is the coolest man in the stadium.
The day before practice penalties, Gus made everyone take a penalty. I stayed behind and practiced 5 penalties, all hit on the same side with Lucas Neal and Ante Kovic was in goals. And Lucas asked me why did I hit it all the same side, and I said, well, if it goes to penalty shootout tomorrow, I'm only going to be getting one chance.
The fans were sucking the ball into the net.
I can still remember the commentary in my head from Simon Hill and Craig Foster. They were confused as to whether or not we were actually going to win it or not.
I was total blank.
But if John Aloisi can score this goal...
More or less trying to convince myself as much as anybody else. And we had a producer in the box with us, and I sort of poked him as I was saying this.
Are you sure? I'm trying to do it on that. 4-2.
And he turned around and had a moment of blind panic, and just as he gave me the thumbs up, Johnny was stepping back to go, for the kick, and I said...
Here's Aloisi for a place in the World Cup. He's
We just ran, we celebrated, the whole bench ran on, and And what a feeling it was.
I didn't know the guy next to me, but I was hugging him.
The longest penalty celebration in the history of world football. Johnny ran the whole length of the field.
That was actually planned the day before. If I did score, I'd run to where my family was. The taking off the top wasn't planned.
Don't throw your jumper away, don't throw your jumper away. It was the most amazing feeling.
Craig Foster's like in the corner just going, yes, yes.
Fozzie loses his shit, let's be honest.
Yeah.
He screamed the name, Johnny Warren.
I'm sure he didn't mean to say it, but it just came out. He would have been the happiest man in that place.
That shootout, those saves, that penalty kick, it all changed after that.
It was probably the best thing that could happen for football in this country.
I remember being proud to be able to wear a Socceroos shirt to school. We'd made it. We were amongst the big boys.
It catapulted football to the next stratosphere here. There's all these new ways of looking at football, and I just think that people now, it's just part of your daily life.
The A-League, we've got average crowds of 14,000, which is almost on par with rugby league.
Qualified for every World Cup since. The Matildas, the women's national team, have won the Asian Cup.
We've got a team that's won the Asian Champions League in the Western Sydney Wanderers, and we've won the Asian Cup on home soil.
Again, another night this country stood up and announced itself that Australian football is evolving even further.
Everyone's always said that football is a sleeping giant, and I think we'll show that whether it takes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. I truly believe, and there's a lot of believers here in Australia, that football will be the #1 sport here.
November 16 is a day for all Australians, Sheilas, Wogs, Poofters and everyone in between. November 16 is Stadium Australia to Edmonston Road. November 16 is the day that Australia became a footballing nation, and the day that Johnny Warren's words, "I told you so," finally rang true.